Yeah, okay. Good evening. I'd like to call to order the Town of Corte Madera Planning Commission meeting for Tuesday, April 25th. This is a regular meeting. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Metcalf. Here. Commissioner Bundy. Here. Commissioner Chase.
Here.
Commissioner Friedman.
Here.
Commissioner Caldera. Here.
Thank you. The first item that we attend to is public comment for anything that is not on the agenda tonight. So if you have something on your mind you'd like to say to the commission that is not on the agenda, then please step up to the microphone, make your thoughts known, identify yourself. You have about 3 minutes. And Miss Jane is making her way to the microphone.
Oh, all right. Good evening, members of the commission, Mr. Chairman, and ladies and gentlemen. I'm here to call your attention to an article that appeared in Sunday's Independent Journal, written by Dick Spotswood, and it's titled "Marin Settles for Run-of-the-Mill Architecture." And it's a wonderful article. I agree with every single word that he wrote. I don't know how many of you saw it, but I sure did. And I just want to comment on the fact that 2 weeks ago, when we were talking about the reconstruction of, or the rebuild of the Corte Madera Inn, Commissioner Metcalf had words to say about making it something other than the run-of-the-mill. And so Mr. Spotswood addresses that topic, not specifically that, but the topic of the mediocrity of much of the new construction in Marin County. And I just want to say that every time I go north to San Rafael, which I now have to do after 2:30 by going south and getting on the freeway in that direction because of the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge backup and what's going on there and what will go on there. I just want to say, when I come to the corner of Wernham Drive and Tamil Vista, and I look at that monstrosity, and the words of Mark Antony come into my mind when he gave the Friends Roman Countrymen speech. The evil that men do lives after them. The good oft is buried, interred with their bones. And honest to goodness, every time I look at that building, that particular line comes to my mind. And I'm not suggesting that there was any evil involved in that construction, but those words just seem to fit for me. And of course, that doesn't apply to current construction or anything that exists, but it certainly must apply to any new construction in Marin County. And I really think that we have to all take a long, hard look at what the rest of Marin County is going to look like in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jane.
Peter,
Yes?
may I just make a comment to what Jane just said? Very fast.
It's not normal, we're not
Yes.
supposed to comment, but you may, in this case, I guess.
Jane, I just want to assure you I sent copies of that article to all the commissioners and all the staff in the planning department and the mayor.
Thank you. Right. I think we all saw it, so we are not a part of that history at this moment. So thank you, Jane. Anyone else who would like to comment on anything that is not on the agenda tonight? Seeing none, we'll close the public comment section then, and we will go directly to new hearings. So tonight, we have before us an application, 304 Corte Madera Avenue. This is a design review and variance application for 560 square feet of additional living space and a 419 square foot garage addition to the existing residence at 304 Corte Madera Avenue. The application also includes a front yard variance for the new garage, bedroom, bath, entrance area, office, and small trash enclosure within the front setback. The existing one-car garage within the front yard setback will be removed. And I recite all of that for the record as usual. And on our dais tonight, there is a letter from the town of Corte Madera to Mr. Haddad at 300 Corte Madera Avenue, November 9, 1988.
I can.
And I'll let
speak to
Mr.
that.
Boyle explain all of that. Please, go ahead, Mr. Boyle.
Thank you. Good evening, commissioners and members of the public. Yes, the project before you is a residential addition, design review, and front yard variance at 304 Corte Madera Avenue. Just to orient you, it's just up the hill from us here. The property site is here. This is Corte Madera Avenue climbing up to Mill Valley. Interestingly enough, all properties to the west of Corte Madera Avenue are in Christmas Tree Hill. However, properties to the east of Corte Madera Avenue are not. So just this is right on the border of Christmas Tree Hill area. Just an overview of the project itself. The home currently has an existing floor area ratio of 28%. The applicant is proposing to increase the FAR to 39%, and the maximum allowed is 40%. Lot coverage currently is 21%, proposed is 29%, and maximum allowed is 30%. Other statistics on the project in terms of the setbacks. There is an existing garage that is currently located in the front yard setback. It's a single-car garage. And the application is, as Commissioner Chase read, is for proposed front yard variance for approximately 654 square feet for garage and living space within the front yard setback. And I'll show you the site plan in a moment that will illustrate that. Outside of the front yard setback, the project conforms to all other setbacks, side and rear. In terms of height, the proposed project is 28 feet, and the maximum allowed is 30. Parking, like I said, there's an existing one-car covered garage. There is parking in front of that, but they would be in tandem. And proposed is a two-car garage, and required is 2 parking spaces, one of them being covered. So the project meets goes from an existing non-conforming parking situation to a conforming parking situation. In terms of the site plan, what is proposed, a little bit, there's a lot going on here, but mainly focusing on this front area here. This is the existing garage currently. There's a diagonal driveway that takes you into that garage. That is proposed to be removed. And in its place is a 2-car garage here, and to the left will be the entryway into the house and an office, and then living area down below. Currently, the home is oriented towards Corte Madera Avenue, and currently the walkway to the front door is way back here in the back left, and so there's a long walkway and deck here that gets you to the front door. The applicants are proposing to remove that deck altogether and relocate the front door from here to the front center of the residence. That's me. And the existing, there is a parking area currently right here. This is public parking. This is on the town of Corte Madera's right-of-way, Corte Madera Avenue right-of-way. And it is open to the public, though it as often looks as if it is private. That is public parking, and does not propose to be, the area does not propose to be changed in terms of the size. The applicant is proposing to improve that with better paving and improving the existing retaining wall and small fence that's located here. And as I point out in the staff report, that's been reviewed by Public Works and will require an encroachment permit to do that work in the right-of-way. So in terms of this front area and the front setback and the garage close to the street, there are some similarities to it to Christmas Tree Hill. That's kind of why I brought that up earlier. Again, this is not regulated by the Christmas Tree Hill guidelines, but it is, this whole area, this side of the street is in very close proximity, and in many ways is similar in terms of the steepness of the lot. Just to showing you, this just gave you more of a specific visual on the existing proposed setback encroachments. This blue line is the setback. Existing one-car garage will be removed. Blue line, the setback of the new site plan, garage and entry area. Showing the existing proposed north elevations. This is the elevation that's visible from 300 Corte Madera Avenue. Starting from the top, existing garage goes away, new garage is added with a peaked roof, and this lower area here is added as well. It's a slight addition onto the lower bedrooms that you can see in the floor plan. You'll also notice that this long deck and front door is being removed. So pointed out in the staff report that if there were privacy impacts, as a result of this long deck onto the neighbor to the side, that those privacy impacts are being removed with the removal of the deck. The existing and proposed rear elevation. This is seen from right at Grove and Montecito, where Grove and Montecito kind of split. Existing to the left here, proposed to the right. Mainly this upper area is what's being added. That's the back of the garage and the back of the office and the entryway. And this is a small bump out for those lower bedrooms. This is view from looking straight on. If you were maybe 25 feet above Grove Avenue, looking at it from the street from more of a pedestrian scale, this is what it looks like today. And here's that bump out, the story pole indicating that bump out. This is to the very right front of the house, the office area, and that large upper element here. This is all added, cannot even really be seen from the lower area. So I just want to give that perspective. South elevation, existing here, small garage being removed. This is in this area being added, again, office and bedroom area below, and new garage beyond that, and then the small area added here as well. A side door for the backyard is added here, as well as a window up above. So that's the south elevation, and oops. Right, the front elevation or west elevation, existing above actually the street level is way up here. So as you probably saw as driving by or doing a site visit, the house is quite invisible from the street. And with the proposal, it's bringing up the house. Mainly, the main intent of this project, my understanding in talking with the applicants, is to provide better vehicle access and safer vehicle access to the garage. Being able to pull out at street level in and out of the second car garage, and just make that more accessible. And so your street view goes from very minimal, what you see today, to this, and so that's probably the most significant change, certainly from Corte Madera Avenue, and very similar to a house just 2 doors to the north, which I'll show you. We did have I guess I'll address the letter that's in front of you. I did have quite a bit of correspondence with the owner of 300 Corte Madera Avenue. He is the gentleman that owns this house here, just to the north. He does not live in California, and so we corresponded quite a bit over the phone. I sent him the plan set. He expressed his concerns, and I've outlined them in the staff report and outlined staff's response in terms of privacy, shading, suggestions of creating the new garage off of Grove instead of Corte Madera Avenue. Just on that note, that would require, if the applicant did choose to do that, that would require a variance as well, because the rear yard setback is right here. And so any significant addition to the back of the home off of Grove and Montecito would most likely require a variance, and certainly the garage would. In addressing, his name is Mr. Haddad, who lives on 300 Corte Madera Avenue. We had the applicant do a shadow study. No pun intended, it's a little bit dark. But the main points I've circled here, what I see as the added shading that will result from the garage addition. A small bit there in December and a small bit here in spring and fall. In staff's opinion, not a significant increase in shading. Certainly, the illustration in your staff report is clearer than this slide. And there is also a significant tree right here in front of Mr. Haddad's home that provides some shading today. The last, I didn't include that letter from 1988 that was written by the Town of Corte Madera Planning Department to Mr. Haddad when his project went before the town, and he was asked to redesign it and lower it, and that's what that letter says. And my understanding, he chose not to come back to the Planning Commission for the revisions. So he specifically, when he saw the packet on the website, asked me to include that. So that's why I brought that to you this evening as kind of historical background. Wanted to talk a little bit about line of sight because it is something Mr. Haddad brought up, and certainly I had Public Works look at it, and I was concerned about it. Again, apologize for the dark slide. So this is standing at the driveway of 304, and I'm looking north. This pole to the left is actually not the front left corner of the garage. It's the front left corner of the shed roof piece that falls over the garage. And so the actual corner of the garage that would really obstruct view is actually off this slide. And so the point of this picture is trying to show that that the major encumbrance of line of sight for one pulling out of 300 Corte Madera Avenue, which is right in here. 300 Corte Madera Avenue has a parking pad. The major line of sight right now is this large stand of bamboo, which is actually owned by 300 Corte Madera Avenue. And so if they wanted to, if sight distance was a problem, they could certainly remove that and currently, and may be able to improve that. While we're looking at this one here is somewhat similar of a home that received design review and a variance approval by the Planning Commission in 2014, where they added a garage within the setback, though the entryway is not. And then another line of sight looking south. At this point, I'm standing in the driveway of 300 Corte Madera Avenue, and again, just kind of illustrating that the utility pole and the large strand of bamboo is what's really blocking line of sight, and the new building itself would be quite a ways behind here. This piece here will be removed, and this will be a flat driveway more or less leading to the new garage. The applicants did reach out to the neighbors as we always ask them to do. The blue is the project site, and the circled properties in red are all folks that submitted letters of support that are in your packet. In terms of similar projects, similar site plans in the area, here's a list of 6 of them, ranging from projects that have variances for garages in the front setback to existing homes that have garages in the front setback, one with a garage and the second unit underneath it. So a total of 6 properties in the immediate area, somewhat of a similar site plan. There are definitely differences. Here's some photos of it. Two-car garage with detached house to the right. This is just down the street, and again another 2-car garage. both within the setback area. Another one right on the street, obviously been there quite a long time, most likely. And that, so that more or less sums up all of my comments. Just like to add, I have the materials, color and materials board is there next to Commissioner Metcalf. We've also included a exterior lighting cut sheet that the applicant has agreed to install that will be night sky compliant. And there's also an arborist report that the applicants are very concerned about the large tree that's in the back of the lot near Grove and also very near 300 Corte Madera Avenue, the neighbor. And so they're very attentive to that and provided an arborist report on their own behalf and to assure us that that tree will be well protected, as well as two of the other trees. And there's also a letter from the applicant responding to Mr. Haddad's two letters. So with that, staff is able to make all of the design review and variance findings, which I have up on the screen here for you, and recommends approval by the Planning Commission. That concludes my report, and the applicant's architect and homeowners are here as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Boyle. So first off, I will ask the commissioners if they have any questions of staff at this point. Phyllis, do you have any questions of
I don't.
staff?
No questions.
Dr. Bundy? No. Jennifer?
Phil, can you go back to the photo that you have that's like showing the perceived lack of massing, I guess, from the street view?
Sure, the plans, that
No, the actual photo.
photo.
Yeah, the photo. Okay,
Oh.
go back. That photo.
From Corte Madera Avenue, I mean, from
So-
Grove.
And then can you point on the map where exactly you were standing when you took that photo? On
Oh, sure.
Grove? Yeah.
Sure, I was, on the map, I was standing that way. So on the map, I was standing right there,
Okay.
on the east side of Montecito.
Okay, thank you. And then my one other question is just about the current non-conforming garage. It's non-conforming because it's tandem, correct? That it has to be two spots, and it's within the front setback, but it has to be two spots, not in tandem, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so it's, non-conforming in numerous ways.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any other questions.
Niccolo?
No questions.
Okay. Phil, a couple of quick questions for you. At the photo of the front of the property with the power pole there. So the power pole, as I'm looking at the site plan, is out in easement, is that correct? And then that the shrubbery, all of this is in easement. And the vertical stake right here is right at the edge of town property. Is that fair to say?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
So
Yeah, it's
as I
right
look at the
there.
plan, that's what it is. And thusly, the,
Right there. There's actually the story pole right there.
right,
This
okay.
is the story pole plan. Yeah, right.
So this shrubbery, what was that material that,
I believe it's bamboo.
bamboo, okay. So it is, looks like it's really spanning both properties at the moment, in a way. Or if the property line were extended, it might, and then does it actually go back into the properties?
The applicant could probably speak to
We'll
it
ask that
better.
of the applicant. Okay,
Got the landscape plan.
great. All right. Of those 6 properties that you threw up on the screen that have similar conditions on Corte Madera, they, for the most part, would all have the required additional car parking, open parking within the setback, typically.
A fair number of them do, yeah, like this one right in front of us does. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
these cars are parked in the, partially in the setback,
Correct.
so to speak. And the one down the street, the stepped garages, that was probably 2012 or something like that.
Right.
Those, that open parking is in the setback, but do you know if those garages are in the setback, or is it just the parking that's in the?
Or the garages are in the setback, and in fact, as an example, this one here, this garage is in the setback.
Yeah,
They received a variance to locate this garage in 2014.
I recall that, it was a clip of the garage that was in the
Yeah.
setback, not the entirety of the
Right,
garage.
that's
right?
correct. But maybe so, yeah, in terms of these here, yes, I mean, I haven't measured it, but I would pretty sure that these would be, at least a portion in the setback, this one even closer,
Yeah,
and certainly that one.
okay. After that, does anybody else have any further questions for staff? No. Okay, then. So, it's time for the applicant. So, who will speak first for the applicant, please?
I don't know, actually.
Go to window or view. View.
Window or view?
Yeah.
Yeah, full screen mode. Full screen mode.
There you go. There you go.
All right. So right is
Okay,
forward and left is back.
thanks. Good evening. My name is Anne-Sophie Safa. I'm here with my husband, Reza Safa. And we couldn't bring our kids because they're at home sleeping right now, but this is Tara and Nina. And we're here to present why we want to make this addition to our house and how we've been reasoning. So I'll just continue. The main trigger for us initiating this project was safety. Getting in and out of our driveway is a nervous, I don't know what to call it, project. Both for us and also for road users on Corte Madera Avenue. There are a lot of bikers and quite a lot of traffic. The other thing is to improve the neighborhood profile. The part of the house now facing the street is not very appealing. We think that what we want to do will significantly improve the profile of the house and the neighborhood. We also have looked into impact for our neighbors and the environment, and this is the most environmentally friendly alternative. We have some beautiful trees nearby and on our property that we want to protect. And also the sunshade study that Phil mentioned. So this is our existing driveway. And as you can see on the left, that's my husband reversing, trying to leave our driveway. And there's just happened to be a cyclist, as usual, coming down Corte Madera Avenue. The tricky part is that the cyclist doesn't see the car and we don't see them. And then when you come out into the street, you end up blocking the first lane, but you still have no visibility. And then to do a three-point turn, you actually end up blocking both lanes. So it's not a very safe maneuver. So what this design proposes is, like Phil mentioned, a garage on street level that will significantly improve the visibility, both for road users on Corte Madera Avenue and, well, for us currently, entering and leaving the garage and the entrance. This is the part of the house now facing Corte Madera Avenue. There are a lot of things going on in that pictures. An old fence, gravel. There's a little shed, patio shed that the previous owners used for a dog. And as Phil mentioned, the entrance is on the north side, but at the end of the house. What we're proposing is to have it all facing Corte Madera Avenue in a more natural way that we believe will be beneficial to the neighborhood. And in terms of the environment, we do want to protect the large oak tree that we have on our property. The arborist report recommends to not do any major structure within the drip line of the tree. And also, as Phil mentioned, we did look into putting the garage towards Grove Street, but that would also involve a lot of excavation because there's a big difference between the street level and the house. And it's also in the middle of an intersection. The sunshade study has been covered, most of it, but it is important. So what we're proposing is not impacting our neighbors' properties. There's no shade on to the houses. Not just 300 Corte Madera Avenue, but also other neighbors. We got a hold of 4 out of 5 neighbors, as you saw on the map that Phil showed. Everyone has been very supportive. We have also one of them here, Bobby Bretzel. Everyone that we've spoken with, we've gone through the plans with, because we actually socialize with our neighbors and we want to make sure that they're comfortable with what we're wanting to do. Everyone is very concerned with the safety. We have other neighbors who've had a similar situation, and also the neighborhood profile. And as I mentioned, in terms of preserving nature and not having an impact on shade and light, we believe that this is the best alternative. So we would like to have your endorsement for the design that we're proposing.
Thank you. Would your architect like to speak as well? Yes, thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jared Polsky. We're Fifi and Reza's architects. I didn't want to say too much because I think Phil did an outstanding job with the staff report and Fifi did a good presentation. So I just wanted to point out, does this have the red light on? Yeah, there's a little light. Oh, here. Yeah. Just want to point out that the driveway is sloping. And if you've gone out to see it, it slopes down here. And I think backing up blind out of that driveway is just really unsafe. But when we came to measure the house, we couldn't park there. We parked here, and it's so difficult just to back up and get out of there that the idea that you'd clear this out and make it so that you can drive out of the garage this way onto the apron, not onto the Corte Madera Avenue, and exit onto the road just seemed like it really needs to happen. The other thing that happened, just as an anecdote, when I came to meet Fifi, I couldn't find the front door. And I wandered around. I don't know if you went on site. It's pretty hard to find. So I wandered around, I knocked on the door, and then there's a deck, and this house needs a front door. And it clearly can't be on Grove because it's 30, 40 feet below. So we wanted to create a safe entrance for the cars, and a safe turnaround, and a front door. And that's really what we're doing. Thank you.
Before you go, I will ask the commissioners if they have any questions for you that are questions of anything about your plan or layout or the applicant. So Phyllis, do you have any questions you would like to ask of the architect?
I have no questions at this time, but I want to thank you for such a complete set of plans. You really looked at all of the elements that we are seeking to find out.
Thank you, thank you.
Dr. Bundy?
Yes, I think you've come up with a nice design to create a front of the house. I looked at that driveway and thought, yeah, that's dangerous. I also went down and looked from Grove about the possibility of excavating and putting a garage in there, and it's all a red zone through there. It's a blind curve. I would not think that that's a very safe solution either. The one concern that I had, and I like the concept of the garage and the front entrance, but because it is in the front setback, I thought the bulk of it was a little too great and wondered if it couldn't be reduced. I noticed that you drive in to the garage and then you step up to the first floor of the new structure, and that the roof is also a different pitch than the existing house, and leaving things basically the same as far as the structure. Could the roof elements be lowered from this of a couple of feet with a different slope, so that the bulk of this was not so great looking at it from Corte Madera Avenue?
Well, we used a hip roof, as you can see here, to slope it away from the neighbor. The slope is not, it's not a steep roof at all, and we used a sort of a lesser, a very low slope roof to create the front porch in front of the garage and at the entrance. And then, let's see if I can see the next slide. No? It's not showing up here. The last slide has the 3D view from the side. I didn't see it in there. There's one more slide, three-dimensional view, it might be in your package, that shows how it all works together from the side. Because really, Reza and Fifi are going to be using this area here. This is their main outdoor space. And when you see this roof mass with the house, that's what all moves together. It's pretty hard to lower this from the street side because it's a pretty low-sloped hip. But really, this gable fits with all the gables in the side yard. We did have a
I do have the entire plan set. Another folder if you want to look that out. Is it one of the sheets or is it?
I think so. It's one of the sheets. I have it in a, I don't know if it would really help, but I have that view.
One of the first ones?
There it is. That's the view. It's not in color. But you can see that this is sort of the massing, the series of gables. This is really their outdoor area. So this is a, yeah, it's their side yard, but it's really their backyard. And this gable, this is a relatively low sloped hip, but becomes that gable that sort of works with the whole side. And we felt that that was the appropriate slope. Could the slope be lessened? It could be slightly. It just seemed like that was the appropriate slope for that gable end.
I guess I was looking at it in comparison to the slope on the rest of the house, and then I was comparing, the height of the garage and the structure to the two-car garage at 296, which with a lower slope hipped roof, seems to be a couple of feet lower. So I, agree with what you've come up with and the concept, but I would like to see if it couldn't have a lower slope on the roof to conform to the rest of the house, and drop the garage level and the floor level on the first floor to the same height.
Well, as you noticed, you go from the garage and you step up a little bit. The reason we did that is because we wanted to use the space under the garage and maintain that space at the current existing main floor level. Mm-hmm. So if we kept the garage, if we lowered the front door, the entry, we wouldn't have headroom underneath there. So we step up a small bit to the entrance. Mm-hmm. And usually the front porch wants to be up a few steps from the apron, and the garage obviously not. So I think we thought that together, the fact that you'd step up to the front door here, so it felt like it was up off the street, and the garage was at the street level, and then that level here, the entrance level, is a full level above what's below. So we're not creating a 7-foot ceiling below that.
Well, would you be able to excavate to lower the level beneath that first level, I guess, was my
Well,
thought in trying to lower the impact of the entire structure?
Well, we want what the objective was to make this room. There's no powder room in the house, so we wanted the powder room. When you came down the stairs, we wanted to be at one level, the whole level, and use the powder room and a little guest bedroom. So we didn't want to step down to the powder room. Could we have done that? We could have, but again, it seemed reasonable that you'd want to step up to the entrance, that extra couple risers.
I think I bring this up just because everything is in the front setback. If this whole structure was not in the front setback, I don't think this would be an issue for me.
Understand?
All right, thank you, Dr. Bundy. Jennifer, questions for the architect and the applicant?
I share some of Commissioner Bundy's concerns about the massing on Corte Madera Avenue. Can you just explain, is there living space above the garage?
No.
Okay, can you go back to the elevation that shows the front, please?
Oops. That one here.
So is that just like a false window?
That's just to bring light into the entrance.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, this is, I don't know, 9-foot ceiling, I think, maybe, you know,
So
it slopes up.
what's the floor to ceiling height on that floor when you
Floor to
walk in?
plate, in other words, from the floor to the plate, I think is 9.
Okay.
Your plan, section
What does it say?
A3.4 shows that the entry ceiling height or plate height roughly is 1110.
Well, that's to the ridge.
No, it says here that's the interior height inside that room, and then you're adding the roof on top of it. So if you zoomed in there, that dimension line that's on your plans right here shows 1110 on the interior right there to that point right there, and then
Yeah,
you've
but
got-
that's not the plate. I was referring to
You're referring
that.
to this?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I mean, there is a volume in the middle of the roof.
Right.
But the plate height is 9.
This back half of it, correct, yes, but the part out
Well,
front.
at the front, I would call that the plate. This is just at that little dormer. There's a little dormer to
But
bring
that
light.
ridge runs the length of the whole
Not
section.
quite the whole length.
So how would it impact the design of the living space if you were to lower that?
Well, let's go back to the
Component.
front elevation, or the front three-dimensional rendering. It's over that way. Really, what you're saying is, could we take this off? That's the height. That's the ball, and we could do that. I just thought it was nicer than just having a plain roof to put the shed dormer in the roof.
Okay.
It just brought light into the entrance. Is it necessary for the use of the entrance? No.
Okay.
I thought it was a nice feature. It sort of broke up a large plane.
But you could also get light in other ways, right?
Yes,
Through.
yes. I mean, if that's if that extra mass is a problem, we could remove that.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Jennifer, is that it? for
Yeah.
the question? All right, Niccolo, questions for the,
No, I don't have any questions.
okay. So, okay, I'll get back to you, Bob. I do want to ask you then, given that the house has essentially a 3 and 12, is that correct, pitch throughout most of
Right.
it? And then you put an 8 and 12 pitch up there on that roof. It is a different architectural element to have
Yes.
that 8 and 12 versus what is a 1934 structure
Right.
that is,
That
from
has the
Grove
si-
Street has certain historical significance, just the way it looks. It's been there a while. And here you've created something that is much more contemporary on top of that. So if you would just explain why you chose to do that rather than keep it homogeneous with the rest of the house.
Well, we studied, particularly studied this view, because that's really where you see it. I mean, you don't really see, you see the front, and it's just, and at the front, you really just see it sloping away from you.
Well, the
So-
owner sees that, but the rest of the world does not see that.
Well, the rest of the world just sees this.
Right.
And as you see it sloping away from you with the 9-foot plate, if we lowered this pitch, I don't think it would have it would be a lower ridge, but I don't know if it would be a dramatic. It's going to still look like a one-story house off of Corte Madera Avenue. So in our mind, correctly or incorrectly, we felt that a one-story house with an 8 and 12 pitched roof wouldn't feel imposing on Corte Madera Avenue. So to us, our challenge was to make this more pleasing, because that's what the owner sees. And we felt that that proportion was more pleasing than the 3 and 12 proportion.
Okay. All right. That's informative. Bob, you have another question?
Yeah, I think the shed dormer added a sort of nice touch and broke that up a little bit, but really wanted to see, I guess, the roof line come down maybe a foot or more, and then to go to the 3 and 12 pitch on the roof from the standpoint of lowering the ridge line.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing that says, oh my gosh, we need an 8 and 12 roof. And we could do the 3 and 12 roof. We're spending our professional lives sort of redoing houses with 3 and 12, but people don't really necessarily want them anymore. But that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with the 3 and 12 roof, and it could be done at a lesser slope.
So, well, I will return to that question in that the house has a character based on the 3 and 12 with the clapboard siding and so forth, and you're sort of veering away from that with this look. And I wondered if you thought about trying to create that a continuum of that period piece throughout the architecture.
Well, for in our minds, correctly or not, we felt what was more important was to maintain the kinds of windows, the kind of siding, the kind of detailing, and the color, and that would bring it together. And could this have been a 3 and 12 roof? It certainly could have, but it seemed, just looking at it, when we look at these things in 3D, we tried at different roof slopes, and we had flat roof schemes, we had steeper schemes, and it just felt right. Now, did it look different than this gable? It did, but it didn't. They didn't seem to compete because they're not sitting right next to each other. When you look at it from Grove, you see those 3 and 12 roofs, but you don't see this in the same context. You see it separately. So our feeling was, let's make this feel as good as we can, and bring in all the detailings to make it merge. But could it be at a lower slope? It certainly could.
Just out of curiosity here, as I look through the plans, it's a significant structure as it is. It's a big house, right? And you're right at the threshold of lot coverage, you're right at the threshold of elevation. You're within the parameters. Being within the parameters doesn't always mean that it's a good idea or approvable in that way. So this becomes a house with an office up there at that level. And I appreciate the balance that it gets to the front of the house, to have that room to the right of the entry. It is a further intrusion into the setback, and but for the sake of architecture, how would you justify that intrusion, additional intrusion into the setback? Because you need an entry, you need a garage, but this office is kind of icing on the cake, so to speak, and being something in the setback.
Well, but where I justify that is, I think the mass, if this just stopped right there, in other words, if if it looked like a garage and a small entry, there'd be a slot there, a visual slot, which I didn't see the purpose that would serve. I don't think it would enhance the experience coming down Corte Madera Avenue. It seemed like it completed the house. It doesn't seem to overpower the house. It's a long way from its setback. So there's the property line is, I think, roughly here. So it's not like it's jammed up against a neighbor. So we felt that little piece sort of completed the front facade. Is it icing on the cake in terms of the program? Absolutely. It'd be wonderful to have an office up there. But it wasn't just that.
Yeah.
I think it looks better when it's longer.
And that's what I wanted to hear, whether you thought it did or not, or how you
do.
got there and,
Yeah.
and why you're getting this added space that's within the setback, right? Because
Right.
it's not easily that such space is granted within the setback, but it does balance the structure. And so you've said what it is to you and to the applicant. So, I think that, before we go to public comment and so forth, I would like to see if there are any other further questions from the commissioners after this.
I have one other question.
Sure.
Can you explain what the screening is gonna be like from from Corte Madera Avenue? It looks like, is there some it looked like in one of the, maybe it's A3.3, that there's some sort of fencing here?
Oh, the
At the
fence is
back
at
of
the
the
back of
driveway.
of the driveway, because you'd fall, it's a steep fall off. There is, there, I can do that. There's a fence back here. There's a significant grade change from Corte Madera Avenue elevation down to the yard. So there's a fence back there.
Okay, so you guys are building a new fence there, correct?
We're replacing, yes.
Or replacing what's
Right
like
now,
the
the garage
lattice?
is, you see, there's the garage down there, so we're replacing that fence, because there's a big drop off there.
So it acts to screen really that area, right?
That's true.
The
That's true.
office? Okay.
Yeah.
It brings to mind something I forgot to ask you. So, now that you have two cars here, and clearly when you back out to the space, you'll be able to see unless somebody's parked here. So this is public parking. Anybody can park there. So what's to prevent this same occurrence of visibility being an issue with people parking there?
Well, at least you can back up, at sort of, you're not right on, like, when you come up out of the existing garage and you back up,
Right.
you still can't see anybody, because you're aiming, you know, the back of your car is above the driver, so it's really unsafe. So if somebody's parked there, this you probably could see well enough. If somebody's parked there and you're backing up, it's not ideal, but it's a lot better than it is now. And I would argue for these people, it's actually, I think it's just generally better to clear this out and have a wide apron, so to increase visibility. We can't put a no parking sign there. I don't
Right.
think it's parked up all the time, though, is it? I mean, if you had a party, I guess. But.
All right. Thank you very much. I don't think anybody else has any further questions for you. Thank you. Just a question for staff briefly then. In any of those other locations then where there is driveway to a garage, because it's access to a garage, the public can't park there. But if they have any space that's in the setback that they have paved, then that would be considered public parking if it's not direct access or a added required parking space.
Correct. Any parking space that's in the right-of-way
Yes.
that is not in front of a garage is a public space.
Got it.
Except unless they go through the process of privatizing it, which is a process you have to submit a request to the town council, and they say yea or nay to privatizing a public space. That happened at, thank you, 422 Redwood. It was a little bit different, but they created two spaces, and those two spaces that they created were in the public right-of-way, and they gained, so two spaces didn't exist, they created two private
Sure.
spaces.
And they're paying for that and paying taxes and insurance on it.
Right, exactly, but
Okay.
so.
All right. Thank you. So, at this time, we would open it up to the public to make comment on this project. You have 3 minutes to make a statement. If you would like to stand up, state your name, where you're from, and have at it.
Hi, my name's Robert Bretzel, and this is my daughter Zoe. You may recall us, we were here when she was 1 month old. And so we live at 296, which is 2 doors north of the residence in question. So just for the record, I'd like to say that we support this renovation as is. We made the same ask of this committee, although some of the members were different at the time. It is incredibly unsafe on Corte Madera, period. Whether you're a cyclist or a motorist, getting in and out of the residence, it's just the way it was created. So our petition was the same ask, to make it safer. And we both have young kids, and that was our motivation. So I just wanted to, for the record, just say I endorse it, and the ask was the same as ours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Who else would like to step up and make a commentary? Going once, twice, all right. Third time, nobody else is going to step up. So with that said, we will close the public portion of this application. And we'll bring it back to the commission to elicit commentary and any thoughts about modifications to this application. So with that said, I've been starting on my right. I'm going to start over on my left with you, Nicolo, and see what your thoughts are about this application.
Okay, so I've studied the project quite extensively, and I also met with staff several times over the phone. And make it simple, I think the staff did an excellent job on justifying all the required findings, design review, and variances. There were some findings that I had difficulties to meet, and but now I was able, once again, with the help of staff. So I am able to concur with staff with all the findings. However, I think that in my case, to make all the findings, I need to first have the variance findings first, and then the design review findings, because two of the design review findings can be met, as far as I'm concerned, if the variants are met, all of them. So just for the record. Other than that, is a well-done project. I think everything has been explained and logical, and I don't see any problems.
So are you saying, Nicolo, that you would like to hear more from other commissioners about the variance required findings, or you have some other questions about
No,
the?
I don't have any questions. I was able to meet them all.
Okay, so procedurally, you're saying that for you, from going from meeting the findings of the variance, then you can go to the design review?
That's
findings.
correct.
Okay.
And if you need, I can list the ones or for
I
record.
mean, if you're not having any issues
No.
with the variance findings and so forth, I may come back and ask you about that.
Okay.
So, particularly with the design review, but we'll come back. But that's what you want to say about it at this time, then?
That's right.
All right.
Peter,
Yes,
from a procedural viewpoint, maybe it would help if we had separate votes, if we voted for the approval of the variances, and then we can vote on the entire package.
well,
Would that make you more comfortable, Nicolo?
Certainly, yes.
yeah, well, they're listed as two different elements in the resolution, but it's one resolution.
That's what I'm saying.
Right.
We could vote on the variance
Okay.
findings, and then we could vote on the resolution as a whole.
Okay, that said, then, I would go to you, Jennifer, and ask you about your thoughts and commentary.
I think I can make the variance findings. I think that it is important to address the safety, and I think that it does that, and I agree that this is a very busy road with a lot of cyclists and cars, so I think that it addresses that issue. And I'll just say right now, the issue that I have is on the design finding, number 4, about the structure being in scale. I think that the massing from Corte Madera Avenue is out of character with the other houses on that street, and I would like to see the applicant consider lowering the pitch of the roof over the garage and front entrance.
For the length of the
Yeah.
structure, right?
Yeah.
All right. So just to reiterate, you're saying that you would make the findings for the variance, but would alter the design review?
Correct.
Okay. Dr. Bundy?
Yeah, 4 also is my concern, as I voiced earlier, and I would like to see the pitch brought down. The dormer, from the standpoint of bringing light into the entranceway, seems fine, and the possibly having that first floor as one step up rather than 2 steps up, just to be able to lower the ridge line and the eave line of the house. But from the standpoint of the concept and what you're trying to accomplish, I think this is a very nice design. I just want to see it scaled back a little bit, and I would be willing to have this, if the rest of the commissioners were in agreement with me, come back to the planning department for approval based on any recommendations that we had.
Well, I think to Phyllis's point, that we could make take a vote on, or motion on the variance, and then have them bring it back for commission review on the design portion of it. But Phyllis, your commentary on this?
Well, I disagree with Jennifer and Bob. I think the house looks fine as it is. And what you do see from Corte Madera Avenue looks like a one-story structure. And I'll go back to what Jane was referring to earlier. We want to see some creativity. We don't want to see something that is very ordinary, and this shows creativity. The change in the roof pitch, the way the front is designed, how it follows the slope of the lot going down. And in reference to some of the other comments that were in some of the letters, it makes absolutely no sense to have the front entrance where it currently is. I mean, there was a time when I had little kids that age. It doesn't get easier, by the way. And trying to, and this would also go along with putting the garage down on Grove Street from a safety factor. You don't have, try to bring little children up and down stairs and around and carry packages and worry about somebody getting away from you, and it is a safety factor. And the first house I had when I moved to Marin had a driveway similar to what you have now, and yes, it is very dangerous. And even in the right-of-way, I had a car parked in the right-of-way one time, and someone came around the curve and bashed right into the back of the car. It is a difficult situation. Marin is, and one of the things that makes it stand out that some people like are all the hills. And when you have hills and curves and homes that are not built in tracks as copycats of each other, you get these type of situations, and you have to work around them, fit into the contour of the land. The other 2 homes on either side are set further back, so in no way will they be interfered with. If you look at, what is it, A06, this works, and it's attractive, and I wouldn't change anything, and I think we'd be making a big mistake if we started to try to redesign this. There were certainly other applicants we've had where we should have redesigned, but this is not one of them.
Thank you, Phyllis. That covers it for you, you think?
Oh, yes.
All right, okay. So, I would commend you guys for a good package. I wish that all packages were this complete, that had the landscape, it had the civil, that had everything in it as they ought to. And it's professionally prepared, and you're commended for having such a good package. It illustrates all the various problems. I would ask, from my perspective, that that ridge be dropped somehow, as it's a 14-foot height from the floor on your plans right now to the top of the ridge. That's significant to do that for a first floor plate or ridge peak, right? We've had some other applications where we've adjusted them 6 inches at a time downward. I think that I would leave it up to you to create something that dropped this either to the lower pitch or somewhere in the neighborhood of a 6 and 12 rather than a 8 and 12. I think a 3 and 12 would be a little squat and flat, and I'm not sure you could provide the kind of lighting that you'd like to, but I would ask that you do create some interest with that entry, but I think a 11-foot-4 ceiling in the entry, while nice, you could find a way to drop the roof over it, and you could still keep that, but find a way to lower that roof to a lower pitch. I felt, standing on Corte Madera Avenue and looking at it, that it was the biggest thing around. And that was not insignificant. It's kind of a street that hasn't had that. I don't think it would be impacting, from my perspective, the design of the neighborhood to have it reduced somewhat. And I think having the biggest, highest structure around would have an impact around there. So I would ask for that to be done, reappraised and looked at. I think that the hip toward the north does what you need it to do, but at the 8 and 12 pitch, it sort of abbreviates the structure a little bit. And if it were a lower pitch, it might make that less a bit of a clip on the end of the roof. That's my viewpoint about it. So otherwise, I would be able to make the findings for the variance. I think that it is about safety, it is an improvement to the property, and I could certainly make for those findings. So with that said, if we were to split this before us, we have two elements that we would be taking a vote on, and one would be the variance and one would be the design review. Is that acceptable to the department? Or-
Let me just try to understand. So the commission would like to actually split these into two different resolutions at this time, so that you can actually pass and vote one of them at this point with, maybe perhaps what I'm getting at is perhaps a continuance on the other one. Right now, we have just one resolution for you. I think it would be fine if you wanted to pass a motion to sort of deal with the variance and deal with the design review separately. I would request, though, that you not sort of approve any resolution and allow us to sort of come back and, if that's what you wanted to do. Trying to split,
Get
put
it.
it this way, we don't have a resolution for you
Right,
that
right.
sort of splits it into
So,
two.
but if we gave you a motion that was succinct in what was approved, then that would suffice. And
Until we come back
back,
with it.
right,
Or-
if the vote turns out that way. So I'll ask for a motion here in a minute, but,
Another option, Mr. Commissioner, is to add a condition of approval that says the plan shall be revised to include a reduced height of the roof, a reduced slope of the roof, or whatever specifics you want to meet your needs. So that could be an added condition of approval, that the plan shall be revised in such a way, and those revised plans shall be reviewed by staff, as Commissioner Bundy suggested.
well,
One
and I would
option.
ask the other commissioners if they were comfortable with that, that would be reviewed by staff, and that as a condition of approval could be done.
Yes.
So that's your viewpoint, and I would ask the other commissioners too. So that would bring us to the point where someone makes a motion and we're going to either accept it as it is or add something to it. So,
Now, we would have a motion on the variances. That would be like a sub-act in relation to then approving the project with conditions, with the change going to staff. But if, from what Nicolo was saying for his comfort level, we should vote on the variance that is acceptable and then look at the whole.
That sort of,
Or just look at the design review second. I mean, so
Okay.
yes,
Yeah.
that's fine. You can do two separate motions and
Yeah,
then at the
which is
end-
not the resolution, or do a resolution, as Phil said, but
Yes.
there is a separate vote on the variance findings.
okay. So that said, that someone makes a motion on the variance, and then someone makes a motion on the design review, as is, or with additions to it, or,
Okay.
Then we'll wrap it up with potentially a motion on the resolution itself.
okay. That's it.
So I can start with the variance. Okay, so I'd like to make a motion to approve design review, no, variance application number PL-2017-0016 DRC,
No,
no,
The design review.
oh, sorry. VAR
If,
for,
if I may, I think you don't have to specifically state the application numbers. If you wanted to make a motion, for example, that all of the findings
Okay.
related to the variances can be made, I think that would suffice.
Yeah.
for-
All right.
Approve the variance findings, that would be your
okay,
motion.
so I make a motion to approve the variances, the findings of the variances, of the variance, 1 through 8.
I shall second it.
Commissioner Bundy,
Yes.
Commissioner Friedman,
Yes.
Commissioner Caldera,
Yes.
Vice Chair Metcalf,
Aye.
Chairman Chase.
yes.
Okay.
So then, design review with or without any conditions, someone make a motion, and then if we're going to condition it,
I would like to approve design review with the following conditions for PL 2016-0016 DRC, that would ask the applicant to come back to the planning department with plans to lower the height of the ridge and the, if possible, the height of the eave to create less mass from Corte Madera Avenue.
I second.
Yeah.
We have a motion on
Peter, you were giving
guidance to
exact guidance in the sense of
the ridge.
the ridge going from, what did he say, what was it, an 812 to a 612?
Yeah, I
I would
would-
rather,
And there below.
I think maybe if you could change your motion to cite what Peter said, it would be more clear.
I did not bring up the eve, Bob, but if you put that out there, then we'd have to address that.
Which, and just for clarification, which eve are you speaking of?
I don't know, Bob, which eve are you speaking of?
Really, the eve that's presented to Corte Madera Avenue from the standpoint of the garage and the house, I would hope that this could be possibly lowered to just one step up, so that the total bulk of the front of the house would be less.
Could,
Okay, so perhaps for clarification there, it sounds like Commissioner Bundy is asking for a reduction in the number of steps to the front door, and then Commissioner Chase is asking for to lower the roof of the front elevation, and if the commission wishes, they can specify, a number of inches and feet that the ridge shall be lowered, or a roof pitch, or both.
can I say, I would ask, rather than us giving a specific and getting into the design, because I do agree with what Commissioner, what Phyllis said about, I think it's a great design. I think you guys have done a really good job, so we don't want to, start saying it has to be 1 foot, 1.5 feet lower, but it sounds like you guys are receptive to considering that, so why don't you use your best judgment and your best design judgment in what would make sense, and come back to the commission, and I think those are all things that could be considered, right? Lowering the roof line and lowering the number of steps from the ground into the entry, right?
Well, I appreciate your thought on that. When I look at the lower level, it's already at a low ceiling height, and I think that lowering that level would be not only an expensive,
This level.
yeah,
Yeah, I
would be
agree with that.
an expensive proposition, but that they've got it up at 7.9, and that's low, so that the main floor is at a reasonable level. That's my feeling about it.
Yeah, I
And-
agree with that.
And if they had to lower that, so therefore, I wouldn't bring to the table a request to lower the entry floor there.
I agree with that.
So right now, they're using that existing lower level, it's 7.9 ceiling to their lifted up floor that is one step above the garage. So this is, I don't think that, it's just this height here that I think has to drop. And if they brought it somehow and created that, they could almost just, I mean, they could do a clip ceiling inside that entry or something and have the lower pitch, and it would significantly reduce the height of that
Pops,
roof. So that's my,
I'll make something.
I guess I was asking for the possibility, since this is new construction here we're talking about, that could be excavated down.
I don't know.
It's, well,
Go
we
ahead,
should have-
Adam, what are you trying to say?
Yeah. As a point of order, I would like to make a motion that Bob remove his motion and the seconder follow, so we can discuss this, and then we'll make a new clean motion of whatever we decide. That would be the appropriate way to do it under Robert's
Agreed.
rules.
Yeah, that it has to be taken off, so
Okay.
that, then we review this. So, okay. Unmake your,
I would ask the applicants to,
Wait, the seconder, you have to take.
Oh, I rescind my second?
Yes.
Okay.
And now we can, go ahead. Adam was getting nervous.
thank you.
I would ask the applicant and the architect to come back to the planning department with a plan to lower the ridge line by either creating a different slope pitch to the roof or any other means that would feasibly lower the amount of bulk that we see from Corte Madera Avenue, and that this will be determined and accepted by the planning department.
All right, that's okay with me. Is the planning department accepting that authority with, okay. All right. Now, on that basis, is there a second for this?
I second.
Okay.
Okay, Commissioner Bundy,
Aye.
Commissioner Friedman,
Aye.
Commissioner Caldera,
No, I would like to keep it as is.
okay. Vice Chair Metcalf,
No?
Chairman Chase,
Yes,
motion passes.
okay.
So with that, can we do a full motion on the resolution as it's incorporated here with the addition of that last?
As a
Certainly.
condition.
With that
Yeah,
condition.
condition.
All right. So we take that resolution number and state that condition and vote on it as a whole. So,
I move we approve design review with the previously stated conditions and variance application number PL 2017-0016 DRC and PL 2017-0017 VAR for 560 square feet of additional living space, 419 square foot garage addition, as well as a variance for the new garage, bedroom, bath, entry area, office, and small trash enclosure within the front yard setback to the existing residence at 304 Corte Madera Avenue.
I'll second that.
With the condition added that was previously
He mentioned
articulated.
that
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I missed that.
first.
Sorry, seconded, so
Yeah.
Commissioner Bundy,
Aye.
Commissioner Friedman,
Aye.
Commissioner Caldera,
No.
Vice Chair Metcalf,
Aye.
Commissioner Chase.
Aye.
Okay, read the appeal rights.
As with all applications, there is an appeal statement following action by the Planning Commission. Any decision of the commission may be appealed to the town council within 10 calendar days. Appeal forms are available at the planning department. There is a $300 filing fee.
Thank you very much. You
Thank
guys,
you.
we'll come back to Adam and Phil with information.
Before we go on to the next item, may I just clarify something?
Okay.
Record. Hi. Something I learned from the county council many years ago. When you participate in a vote, even if you are not on the prevailing side, you own that vote. By participation, you agree, even though I voted no on the condition, the fact that it passed 3-2 meant that I, in essence, own that vote, and that's why I was able to second it, and that's why I was able to vote for the resolution. And I think we should remember that when we take votes in part, we own what happens.
Thank you for that procedural reminder. You're very good at that. So it's appreciated. All right, and go forth with your project, bring it back to staff. Good luck with this. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
So that said, the other piece of business before us tonight is a lot coverage study session. Mr. Bush has that on his plate. This is a study session for discussion of potential modifications to lot coverage standards for the R1 single-family residential zone.
Thank you. Good evening, Commissioners and members of the public. Thanks, everyone who's stuck around to participate in this part of the evening as well. So this is a study session. As a reminder, that means no resolution is to be passed tonight on this. This is a kind of an open discussion between everyone in the room here to weigh in on potential modifications to the zoning ordinance regarding lot coverage. And this is the second hearing on this topic. So we will cover just briefly a couple of things we talked about before, just to get a common understanding of lot coverage and why we're here, and then move on to some of the specific language that might be considered for a future hearing where we would bring back a formal zoning ordinance amendments for a resolution for recommendation to the town council. So just to start with the very basics, again, repeating some of the information from the last hearing to get everyone on the same page here. Lot coverage is by definition the footprint of structures on a lot, the percentage of the lot area covered by structures as shown here. You have two different ways to visualize this here. On the left is taken straight from our zoning ordinance, and on the right is another way to look at it. It's basically if you're looking overhead at development, it's that total footprint in relation to the size of the lot. So how is that calculated, and what goes into the lot coverage? Because there's various elements from decks to stairs to a house itself, and this is where we get the specifics in the code about what is counted. We'll go over some of that, but in essence, all structures over 3 feet in height are calculated toward the total lot coverage. And there is an additional lot coverage of 2% for uncovered decks for properties in the floodplain and that are raising to get out of that floodplain. And just to rehash again, the existing lot coverage standards are flexible based on size of lot, and they range from, at most, allowing 35% for lots 6,000 square feet and below, and that reduces down to 30% for lots that are 7,500 square feet or above. So as we discussed in the previous hearing, The reason that we're here and that we're discussing potential changes are, well, there's a few factors. One is because of the numbers of variance applications we received for lot coverage in the last couple of years, and the last decade even, looking back, and in an effort to reduce those variance applications and to kind of use the number as a moment to reflect and think about maybe there's something to that, and kind of exploring and revisiting lot coverage and seeing whether it is appropriate as is or whether it should be changed. And I think there was some consensus in the prior meeting among staff and the commission that changes would be justified, and that looking into this further would be the best option. The other, another reason is to facilitate single-story additions by making lot coverage, by having a less restrictive lot coverage and allowing more of the lot to be covered by structures. You can provide residential property owners with additional options for expansion. Whether it's setbacks or floor area ratio that limits the amount of square footage that can be on a lot. Lot coverage is one of those standards that forms the options available to a homeowner for developing on their lot. And the another point of consideration is looking at Corte Madera's lot coverage compared to other municipalities in Marin and elsewhere. It is one of the most restrictive. So that's always helpful to look at what other municipalities are doing. So I've laid these things out very simply as they're shown in the staff report as well. This is based on feedback provided by the commission based on the prior discussion at the last study session hearing, that the first change would be an increase in lot coverage to 40% for R1 parcels over 4,500 square feet. As mentioned previously, lot coverage currently ranges from 30 to 35%. This would increase that to 40% for all lots over 4,500 square feet, while also eliminating lot coverage for lots that are 4,500 square feet or less. I won't go through all of these specifics on the existing, but I have that for direct comparison with some of the potential wording and the potential policy on the next slide. So part of what we're seeking to achieve here is not only possible changes to the policy, but also any opportunity to clarify and just rewrite for purposes of clarity and of being able to read this, whether you're an applicant or staff or the commissioner, to be able to understand what the code is saying. So hopefully we've achieved that here. So I'll read through this. So measured in accordance with section 18.24080, on lots greater than 4,500 square feet, not more than 40% of the total site area shall be covered by structures. Very simply put. No lot coverage requirement shall apply to lots less than or equal to 4,500 square feet in area, and then the additional provision that's provided elsewhere in code, but reiterated here for clarity, that houses that are raising above floodplain get an additional 2%. One of the reasons that staff has identified 4,500 square feet as sort of this cutoff between where lot coverage is applied and where it is not is based on the understanding that setbacks already serve to provide a predictable proportion of open space on a lot, whether basically any lot that's 4,500 square feet or below, of which there are approximately 130 to 150 in the R1 zone, so a fair number, have 5-foot side setbacks, 15-foot front setbacks, and 25-foot rear setbacks. And we'll show some examples of what that actually looks like on a smaller lot. And you'll see that those setbacks alone already create, at least depending on the configuration of the lot, may create 50% or more of open space already without lot coverage applied. So we'll go over a couple examples here. So 4,500 square foot lot, shown on the left, two configurations. One has a 70-foot frontage, and then one has a 40-foot frontage. What we're showing here is that without any lot coverage, just by virtue of the setbacks, it results in 32% lot coverage, effective lot coverage. So currently, a lot of this size and this configuration is limited to 35%. When you actually show this example, you realize that lot coverage is no longer even the ruling factor here. It's really the setbacks, which give you 32%. Looking at the 40-foot frontage.
Could I just put in a point on that? Actually, in a sense, it creates a conflict between lot coverage and setbacks, where you're allowed 35%, but you can't get it because setbacks require that you set back more than.
Appreciate that. Looking at the 40-foot wide lot here, you see the 35% gives you this much, and removing lot coverage would give this additional, bringing it up to 48% effective lot coverage. So clearly it does provide some room for flexibility, but that is similar to what is already kind of acknowledged in the current policy, which allows, a greater amount of lot coverage for lots that are below a certain size. So that's understood that there are certain configurations, although somewhat unlikely to have a 40-foot frontage on a 4,500 square foot lot, but this is trying to show the extreme of what that might look like. Looking at a more standard, and actually the standard size for an R1 lot, 7,500 square feet, again with a 70-foot frontage and a 40-foot frontage, just to have that consistency and show two sides of the coin. Again, you see the existing policy in gray on either, and then what 40% looks like. And again, this is just to get kind of visual proportions of what this looks like. Of course, this could happen in any number of different configurations. And then we'll come back to this in just a moment to explain what the yellow portion is showing here. So the second possible change is to allow an additional 2% lot coverage for certain structures, unenclosed structures, no greater than 10 feet in height, such as arbors, trellises, and raised decks. And so this would add to the changes already proposed. This would add this line here. The idea here is that certain elements that count toward lot coverage, lot coverage is really about creating a certain proportion of open space to built structures, and there's some understanding that certain structures are more permeable, they have more of an airiness, for lack of a better word, that even is a word, to them, so visually they take up less space. And so an example of that might be an overhang that has no enclosure on any side, that provides some sun shading. We've seen applications even recently for lot coverage variances, largely just to be able to have that covered, shaded kind of a porch, or even to have a tool shed or something like that in the rear yard. And so this is based on that understanding that it's very common to have kind of these additional landscape type features, arbors, trellises, things that would normally count toward lot coverage, and giving those an extra 2% for specific cases. This is where, this is not necessarily something we had discussed in the last hearing, but in starting to look at examples of different properties in Corte Madera and looking at different scenarios that seem to be, a reasonable kind of an idea that was tossed around. So we're looking for feedback from the commission, members of the public, on what this might look like. And
Yeah, I would just say the specific, and Doug referred to it, but we did see an application recently where there was a covered patio, so to speak, in the back, and several homes in this area of town had that feature because the sun was just blaring in, but that put those homes almost in their existing condition over 40% lot coverage, up to 43 or something like that. So this is sort of a reference to that. That sort of situation where 40 would be the cap, but you could get up to a couple more percent for some of these sort of lightweight or lighter weight structures in addition.
And so, just following up on this, this is where we go back to the examples here. Obviously, on a 4,500 square foot lot, well, first of all, the policy as it's shown would not apply to lots 4,500 square feet and below. It would apply to lots above that. And here's the example shown on 7,500 square feet, what 2% looks like in proportion to the entire lot. And this can be shown in different configurations. This might take the form of a shed, as I mentioned, or of a, this might be what a shaded overhang or an extended awning might look like on the back of a house. I mean, obviously abstracted here, but just again to give that visual proportion. We'll skip that for now. Lastly, again, in an effort to clarify what is our current definition or measurement of coverage, this is the method to calculate lot coverage, and this is a simplified version.
And I think the point here, we're not, I mean, again, this is not intended to be reviewing the exact language of a zoning ordinance amendment at this time. I think we're trying to say this would be one of the proposals we would come back to you with as a specific language clarifying how it's calculated and some changes to existing sections of the ordinance to just provide clarity and simplicity. So we don't need to get into necessarily the exact language here.
So it is a piece of a greater effort, that's what you're saying about this?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's the main piece of this is changing the actual percentage and the numbers. And the other part of this is just simplifying language and providing clarity in the existing, in the code language, which can be challenging as we look at lot coverage and how it's defined.
And to that point, I won't obviously read this right now, but the intent of this is not to change the method at all for calculating or measuring lot coverage. It's simply to rephrase it. So this really is just about clarity, whereas the other two are more about changing specific numbers and having obviously a more substantive effect.
And I would, just again, this was in response to the commission at the last meeting, really directing staff to kind of come back with a little bit more meat on the bone, so to speak, after our last discussion with some more specific proposals of how we would actually deal with this, taking into consideration some of the thoughtful comments we had last time from the commission and also a couple of the architects that were in the room. And so I think, and Doug really went back and took some hard look at some other recent cases, and also we had, did some examples, and we did some different, and we used sort of maximum ranges here, 70 and 40 lot width, 70 and 40 feet of lot width as examples, but we looked at even a variety of different lot shapes you might get. I think the average is somewhere more in the middle, 50 to 60 feet, which brings you, again, how we came up with the 4,500 square foot number as the cutoff. When you do that, and you have about a 50 to 55 foot width of a lot, you end up at about, with the setbacks, about 40% lot coverage without the need of actually specifying lot coverage percentage there. So we're here, again, no resolutions, it's a study session, but we are looking for that direction to move forward or to have a discussion about how things might change based on this information. And also hear again from the public. We did different sort of noticing methods for this meeting just to get as many people out as we could. But looking forward to hearing what everyone has to say about this one as well. So.
Okay, thank you. Phyllis, you had your hand up. You had a question?
Yes, I wanted to go back to this discussion about the 2% for unenclosed structures. Couple of questions. First one, is this something that's a pattern throughout the county zoning?
So there are certain cases, this wasn't taken directly from another ordinance, but there are certain examples where towns may treat lot coverage differently depending on the configuration of the house, whether it's 2-story or 1-story, kind of getting into the details there.
No, what I'm asking about is, I find it very difficult to accept the fact that if somebody wants to put up a trellis, or an arboretum for wisteria branches to hang from, that you start thinking of that as lot coverage. This is not the bandstand in Menke Park. And I am wondering if other jurisdictions within the county or the county itself sits there, sends out the code police to see, gee, did somebody put a trellis up as part of their landscaping? And if we're getting a little bit too detailed into things that, they're important things to worry about when it comes to lot coverage and square footage and open space. But trellises and arbors are really pushing it as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and that's somewhere where, if we want to look at the actual measurement of lot coverage and how it's defined now, and maybe more specifics about things that might be exempted from that, it's hard to encompass all things that would be included, but if there's specific things like a trellis, something that's open or permeable like that, that may be specifically exempted, then we can definitely integrate that. As far as comparing with other towns, I'm not.
I'm
Well,
just
I
wondering
think
if
the
this
point-
is a pattern.
Yeah.
Well, I think you're bringing up an interesting point, but we're actually we're not proposing that we start counting these things differently. I think the issue is currently, if you read the definition of coverage in our existing code, it points out all sorts of very detail-oriented things that actually lead to sort of confusion in some regards. And I think we're trying to actually simplify it by actually calling out these other specific features that do count towards lot coverage. For example, right now, what is excluded from lot coverage are things like unenclosed decks, I believe is, let me see. Yeah, so it says, the measurement of coverage today, the percent of a site area covered by structures shall be measured by dividing, and that's on the slide, measured by dividing the total number of square feet of ground area covered by structures, open or enclosed, by the net area of land, provided that the area of uncovered and unenclosed off-street parking, spaces, walks, patios, in-ground swimming pools, and it goes into the other stuff. But the fact that it says unenclosed patios, and uncovered decks. So actually, when you think about, when you put a trellis on a deck, and we've seen this, is that uncovered or is that covered? So we would actually specifically call out trellises and flip it around and say, basically, if you put a trellis up, whether we're going to count it as lot coverage, whereas currently an uncovered deck is not counted as lot coverage. So we get into this regardless, and I think all jurisdictions to a certain extent do, because you can't you sort of anticipate as much as you can in terms of what people may put up. But I think one way to do it would be to exclude those things, or another way to do it would be to actually allow for additional lot coverage for those things. And I think we're looking at it from the standpoint of the point which we talked about last time. The point of lot coverage to a certain extent is mass and structure and some sort of physical object that is above 3 feet in height, which a trellis and some of these eaves and other things do qualify as those sorts of structures to a certain extent. We're just pointing out that those structures have a little different quality than an actual enclosed addition to a house with 4 walls and a roof. And so we would give it, a little extra lot coverage for those things, which are a little bit sort of airier, lighter, open on sides and things like that. And so we're trying to define that as much as possible, but currently the code actually creates some questions that aren't easily answered, and so we're actually trying to solve that as well.
And one way to think of it too is that floor area would not necessarily account for a trellis or other built structures, and there's a point at which if floor area doesn't speak to that, lot coverage doesn't speak to that, it leaves possibilities open for a number of different structures throughout that could be at varying heights and potentially have neighbor impacts and things like that. So it's it's kind of one way to accommodate or account for those things that may otherwise.
Just out of curiosity, how do you account for awnings that are a fabric that can be rolled up? Do you measure them when they're closed or open?
It's good.
Well,
Come on.
actually, I have a question on this subject.
Just a second. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, no, I just wanted to tie it to that. Lot
Yeah.
coverage, do we typically, doesn't it include the footprint of the building? We're covering not anything that is like an overhang. Why does it count towards lot coverage?
So both the footprint of the structure, well, the footprint of the structure is counted, and then any eave that extends beyond 3 feet from the wall of the structure is also counted. So it does allow for, a 3-foot eave without counting that toward lot coverage. But as soon as it goes beyond that, it becomes a more extensive feature, then if you have a 5-foot eave, that 2 feet that extends past the 3 feet counts toward lot coverage. That's,
Just the 2 feet,
yeah.
not the whole thing.
Yeah.
So it's trying to get at the physical mass to a certain extent. Yeah.
Okay, and last,
Go ahead.
would maybe the 3 feet right now, structure above 3 feet, they count, maybe would make any sense maybe to increase the height from 3 feet to something that is more like 6 feet, like in other cases on the code? That's a number that in many codes changes a bit the type of structure. Just some thinking to do. Because 3 feet, really, even a little dog, little
Well, I've
Shed.
seen significant dog runs with a 3-foot, but, so this is about a thing. You put a thing on the site, you have to define it.
Yeah, and I think we felt actually the 3 feet actually works pretty well from a standpoint of, if you think about a 3-foot deck, things, once you get, you're essentially, at some point, you're creating space that somebody's going to, let's say, a deck, stand on, and all of a sudden, you're creating a different sort of relationship between that property and another property or the surrounding areas. So when you're 3 feet off the ground, and I don't know if this is the direct relationship here, but I think I guess the point is we found that 3 feet works pretty well. You're allowed to do patios and things that are very low to the ground and certain features. Once you start building up, you start to have a different relationship with, depending on how such a thing is used, but presuming that somebody's going to stand on it or use it as an outdoor space, it starts to become potentially something that
yeah, sure.
creates a physical component.
It's a
to it.
difficult one, because what about like the play structure? Some play structures are kind of,
That's a different element.
yeah. So wouldn't maybe, I know that it's difficult, but to define elements
Well,
by
there's also a
terms of
component
living.
of temporary, I mean, you get
Ah.
into temporary versus fixed structures. I mean, we generally don't look at a temporary, something that your plate, like there are certain,
Right.
picnic table or something, we're looking at sort of fixed structures, really, is what it comes down to. And even a play structure can be removed and moved around and all over the place. I mean, that's not typically we haven't run into that sort of question directly, to be honest. But I would think we would have that distinction between a temporary movable object that's over 3 feet versus a structure that's built into the ground.
That makes sense.
Okay, so I'm just gonna go back and say, when you pour a slab of concrete and you have nothing on it, it's not considered lot coverage, if it's outside the building. As Soon as then you put posts and lattice work over the top of it, then you're gonna consider it something that has some benefit of coverage. And then if you put clear plastic over the top of that, then that is enclosed, right? So, or what is that?
It's the same, I mean, I think what
Right.
we're saying, it would be the same thing. I mean, you would get, we'd consider it coverage, we're just saying if you're at 40% already, you can go to 42
Right.
with the trellis or structure.
Right.
You may not, a lot of times you're not approaching this 40% threshold anyways, a lot of
So-
existing structures.
Then, if it's a, say it's a stone patio and you put a trellis over it, then that falls into this area of the 2%. In a 4,500 square foot lot at 32%, you get 1,440, and you go to 40%, you get 1,800. It's not a lot of, and the 2% on the 4,500 is 90 square feet. It's not a lot of square footage that we're talking about here. So it affords what exactly, 2% on that small amount?
Well, and another important detail is that there is a provision in the code that allows 12% of a rear yard to be covered by an unenclosed structure, and an additional 12% of the rear yard to be covered by an enclosed structure. So what this does is, and I have a slide for that as well, is allows, in this situation, when you look at the rear yard that's created and you do 12% of that, you can get up to this size of an enclosed structure. In this situation, that gives you a 120 square foot structure that can go in the rear yard. So there is this already in place that allows for some of that in certain situations.
But just about 4,500 square foot, we're saying there's no lot coverage. We would get rid of lot coverage. So you would just be governed by what can go in setbacks. and not.
Setbacks, right.
So it wouldn't be 2%, wouldn't matter. You just follow the rules of these rules.
So given that
That's
clarity,
fine.
do you guys have any other questions for staff before we open it up?
Yeah, I think this is, having that 2% in there might encourage people to do some interesting, nicer structures, rather than just putting a Home Depot shed back there or something like that. So I think this may, add some nice, visual interest and use to the outdoor aspect of your properties. I did have a question. There were some aspects to lot coverage that related to flood zones where you're on the water and what the mean high tide level was, or I can't remember the exact wording on that. But I always thought that was a little unfair if somebody had a lot, but the tide was on it, you couldn't count that as part of your lot for lot coverage. So are we eliminating that?
We haven't proposed any modifications to the provision that's specific to raising a home out of the floodplain.
No, this was calculating lot coverage. If you had a 8,000 square foot lot, but maybe the last 20 feet of it towards the water was below a certain
net.
tide level, you were
Yeah.
not able to calculate that as in your lot coverage. Your lot coverage was reduced, or your lot was reduced.
Your lot, and so it's actually a different measurement. That I think you're describing the definition for net area of land.
Yeah.
So it's a different definition, a whole different measurement that we're not looking at as part
Okay.
of this. It's so, but right, there are provisions for how you basically, yes, your property boundary says you have a 10,000 square foot lot, but you have a certain percent, you have, 20 feet of it is essentially under NAVD, whatever, 6.2. You don't count that for your FAR, for example, because you're essentially your net area of land or your lot size for the purposes of calculating everything shrinks.
I guess I always thought that was unfair when, you're not creating an issue of setback or anything like that, that you would be limited in what you would be able to build relationship to a neighbor that just had a little bit higher lot. So, but that we're not really addressing that.
We
so
can
I'll-
tackle that next time.
Yeah, I'll stay away from that.
All right, but you gotta have room for your arc.
Yeah.
Okay, Jennifer, any thoughts?
Can you, Doug, just clarify, so you have on the top of page 3 of the report, this proposed section E, and then down below, you also have proposed section E? I'm just confused about what's the proposed section E.
So this is just The second one is taking, it's basically assuming that the proposed 1808-220 in the first section is carried through. I mean, it assumes that those changes are approved with the addition of this. So, in other words, the proposed that we're showing in number 2 assumes that not only the 2% is added, but that the proposed in section 1 is adopted as well, if that makes sense.
Okay, so
In
it's
other words,
kind of
yeah.
repetitive. then.
Yeah, it's,
Okay, then I would just point out, I think in the proposed section E under 2, you reference in number 3, the lot coverage allowance for the site as described in subsections 1 through 3 above, but it's really just 1 and 2 above.
yep, I noticed that as well. It was
Got
a
rid of number 3.
unintended omission.
No problem.
Yeah.
And then, can you just explain what the intent is of the exception for the special flood hazard area and why it's necessary?
Yeah, so the idea behind that, my understanding of the intent there is that when you raise a home, however many feet above what it is now, you're gonna need steps to get into the front door, whereas maybe the existing, you have a single step or you have no steps at all. When you're raising it up, you need those steps to be able to enter the home, and potentially you'll have decks that need to be raised somewhat as well. So it's kind of acknowledging just the practical effect of raising a home and trying to accommodate that.
Okay, but, and then section 2, allowing for this additional 2% for unenclosed structures, this is a completely new concept, correct? So
Correct.
doesn't that actually just supersede the, I guess maybe this is just getting too nitty-gritty at this point, but the, acknowledging the, again, the special flood hazard area,
So
seems like that's already addressed then, that like, why do you, I don't know, it just seems repetitive to me, but
yeah.
maybe we don't need to get into like wordsmithing it right now, we're just talking about
Well,
concept.
Well, for example, if a house were in the floodplain, let's assume, each of these proposals go forward, and a house was in the floodplain, they have 40% lot coverage, and there's a 2% if they raise the home above the floodplain. Is the question, do they also get an additional 2% on top of that 2%?
Right, that's what I'm
And
not-
essentially 44%?
Right, that's what I'm not clear about.
Yeah,
If
as,
it's
I think as
additive,
it's shown,
okay.
that would be the case.
Okay, got it.
All right, anything
you.
else before we open it
No.
up to the public comment?
If you don't mind, just clarification, so on the lots below 4,500 square feet, then we still have the FAR that
Correct.
applies?
Correct, and that would be 60%.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else? All right, there's a few of you left here, but at 9:30, we'll ask if anybody wants to make a public comment about this. Please step up and state your name and where you're from.
Good evening, Commissioners and ladies and gentlemen. My name is Lynn Young. I live in Mariner Cove. My husband and son were here earlier. As you saw, my son lives with severe disabilities. We have been working, some of you know, for almost a year to try and add a sunroom as a activity room for my son. And there have been a few things like signatures and arrows and stuff, but the main complication has been that sunrooms are, you don't choose a size, there's several set sizes. The size we want comes out, as Mr. Chase said, 2% is not much. Ours would be 1% above the lot allowance. We have a 6,000 square foot lot, and that's only 60 square feet above the allowance. And that has been the major sticking point in this. Now, if you look, we're not having plumbing in this room. We are going to add some electricity, but no plumbing. If you look at the newspaper recently, 105,000 annually is low income, and there are a lot of people in this area. We were blessed that this house was purchased by my in-laws in 1959, but there are a lot of people in this area who want to add maybe a room with a bathroom for family members to move in. And so 1%, 5% is not that much. I'm actually thinking, I was calculating that with a 6,000 square foot lot, 45% coverage would still leave 3,300 square feet for landscaping. I have 34 roses. I have 3 Japanese maples. I have vegetable gardens. None of that is going away. And I have lawns. I've put turf in the front. But I really think that we need to increase it, and I think 40% is low. And hopefully I'll get my 1%. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Hi, Zach Clare. I live in Madera Gardens. So I have just actually a question. Is the FAR something that's under consideration or something that they're being looked at?
Right, we'll answer that.
No.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is there any specific reason why that wouldn't be something that would looked at? And the follow-up question to that is, how does the FAR allowance compare to other towns? Because we're using lot coverage as a point of comparison for other towns. But it'd be interesting to know what FAR coverage is relative to other towns.
We can answer that. But we'll take your question here. Those guys will do it. What
Okay.
else do you want to
And the
add?
question is just that, kind of like big picture, I think Corte Madera's got huge potential. I work in the city with a bunch of people that are young, looking to move out of the city. And Corte Madera is one of these areas that I think is highly sought after, but isn't necessarily seen as a place that has huge opportunity for families. And it's because a lot of the house size, generally speaking, relative to other towns in the neighborhood, are small. And so one of the limits that people see when they look at Corte Madera is moving out with families. I have 2 kids. John here has 2 kids. You know, a lot of people that the reality is that a 2,000, 2,500 square foot house is relatively small in comparison to a lot of the neighboring communities. And so it's a question that it is relative to other communities. It's just an open-ended question, and I raise it as an opportunity for kind of further development, further growth, and further potential for Corte Madera because of the location, the proximity to the city, proximity to the ferry is amazing. But I think sometimes the FAR and the specific house coverage limits its growth potential, its tax-based potential, and just kind of its opportunity to progress. So I think that's the broader question I have.
Thank you very much. All right.
It's just interesting to hear the range of opinions on this. It may not be relevant, but I'll say I was born in Marin, and people love Marin for being different than the city. People love Marin for being different than Emeryville and Walnut Creek and any place else where you're chock-a-block. We have a huge commercial center. Now we have WinCup. We have sections of the city that are chock-a-block and lots of activity. And then fortunately, we have sections of Corte Madera that are mellow and back up against the hillside, and you don't feel like you're in San Francisco. And to me, that's the beauty of living here. Nobody has to choose to live here, but it's an option, and it's a pretty awesome option. So I think that adding, basically, for any lot over 7,500 square feet, 30% more lot coverage is a huge big deal. And one of the reasons it's a big deal is that then there's no trigger that you have to talk to your neighbor or get a neighbor's sign-off if you want to build to that level. So basically anything could be done without having to get neighbor's approval, whereas now you need to get the neighbor's approval. So all in all, I think we have a great system here. And I would ask also, if we're going to go ahead and allow larger lot coverage, when does it stop? In 20 years? In 25 years? Are we going to be having 3,000-foot houses? I think we should look at what we have in Corte Madera and embrace it.
Thank you, Jennifer. Who else would like to step up?
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, thank you. Bill Rose, 104 Palm Avenue. My hat's off to staff and to the Commission for considering this. I'm a resident of Corte Madera, but I'm also a working planner. I work for the city of Santa Rosa. I've worked for a number of other cities, Sausalito, Palo Alto, several others. You know, Santa Rosa has a 40% lot coverage. I think if you could call out an industry standard, 40% is probably the closest. And I can't recall in 10 years one lot coverage variance. So I think the fact that you're looking at variances here in Corte Madera fairly regularly says something. The other thing to consider is lot coverage is just one development standard. You have setbacks, you have height, you have floor area here in Corte Madera, and you look at all of those together when you add in parking, when you put in tree preservation, you have a number of constraints that you're considering. And I think what this does is it gives some flexibility to the designer, and most importantly is it's encouraging single-story construction, which is really important in a hillside community. So I think that it's a good thing to consider. It's a modest increase. And one other thing is a lot of cities like Santa Rosa don't require design review or any discretionary review for single-family homes. The threshold's fairly low in Corte Madera. So a number of projects will still go through a public notice process where the public can be involved, where you get a chance to look at it, where there's discretion. So I think that all in all, what this is doing is it's just encouraging more flexibility, and it gives the designers more opportunities, and it's a modest increase. It's really not that much. So I encourage you to consider it, and thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Seeing none, then we'll close the public comment section of this. So, Planning Department, who would like to answer the question about the
Yep.
FAR and so forth?
Yeah, I mean, I think there, actually, a couple of these sort of go together. And just to be absolutely 100% clear here, we're not looking at floor area ratio, which is ultimately what determines how big a house can be. That is not something that this purposely doesn't look at this point in time, although I do get the comment, you know, I think FAR was actually adopted in 2000, and I believe it was 7 or 9, 7. And it's always something, just as we're doing with lot coverage, that we can reevaluate. But I think, as the last speaker just said, one of the reasons why we came forward with a proposal on lot coverage was because we have seen a number of variances to by homeowners, and it was specifically something that the commission had asked us to look at as a result of some of these applications that we've been seeing. But it does not in any way affect the ultimate size of a house that can be built on any given lot. And in fact, one of the outcomes that I think we really saw as a beneficial as changing this, as again the last speaker described, was that really the potential is to get more flexibility, allow for more single-story design, rather than sort of when you reach your maximum lot coverage, forcing people to go to a second story, which, as we've seen in many applications, has potential implications for privacy and neighbors and other things. So, you know, that's still going to be an option, but this provides that flexibility where people want to bump out, or, as the first speaker mentioned, a small bump out on the back. Previously, that would require getting a variance application, even if it didn't necessarily require design review. You were below a design review threshold. So in that case, it also benefits homeowners who are looking at very modest expansions, not having to go through the financial burden of a variance application and the time and energy needed to do that. And we've seen several of those applications as well. So, or proposals as well. So I hopefully that's clear to those members of the audience who spoke about sizes of houses and sort of how large things can get. That's not what this proposal is about. It's about allowing the footprint to expand horizontally rather than forcing things up and away.
Which is what we've seen, right? The inclination to go up when they can't cover that piece of property. So then another question would simply be about the process in that now a major design review or on a single family residence, if it's over the 50% rule or whatever the rules are for triggering major design review are still in place. None of that changes. Is that correct?
No, we're not proposing to change the process. I think when we do see a new second story, by basically our policies that we put in place, we do say that goes directly to that's going to go to the Planning Commission. However, it doesn't, if there's a increase in floor area over 250 square feet on a single-story home, that's going to require design review. Usually, we may handle that at the staff level, we may not, but notice is still given to all the neighbors and whatnot in
Right.
the same way as long as design review is required.
Noticing and awareness of the neighbors is still
Absolutely.
in place.
And
And
absolutely.
there is no, we've talked about this many times, there is no sort of agreement or neighborhood review required of anything.
Right,
It is
requirement
simply,
for approval.
we
right.
try to push that they reach out and they touch and they explain and they sit down, but it's never been a specific requirement of that to, for approval or even consideration.
Right. And it's important to note as well, we discussed in the last meeting that lot coverage, I think as Mr. Rose had mentioned, is one of numerous development standards and works in tandem with those. And when something is triggered for design review, it does need to meet design review findings, obviously, which look beyond, in the same way that floor area is not a guarantee, it's a maximum. Height is 30 feet is not a guarantee, it's a maximum. And it's always a matter of looking at what's most appropriate and whether findings can be made. So by increasing lot coverage, whether it's to 40 or otherwise, doesn't open the floodgates to bad design or anything of that sort. It just provides more flexibility and hopefully more, allows for more creativity. So.
All right. So, Phyllis, any thoughts you want to end up with here?
No, I like the direction we're going in. I still question trellises and arbors, whether we could get too hung up on little details like that.
We can make it even more complicated and start talking about 3-foot squares of concrete or pervious concrete and many other things.
Oh.
But I think the town is
No, I
rightfully
realize that, but
looking at
I'm
it.
saying, I
reduces
think we are going in the right direction because we've seen a lot of variances, and I think 40% is a far more reasonable percentage to use, and it makes sense.
For under 45 and under,
Yes.
right. Dr. Bundy?
No, I applaud the staff on what you've done on this. I think this really makes for better design when you have, existing single-family homes, single-story, and you stay on the same level. It is integrated much better. A lot of the second stories have been sort of massaged excessively and really don't look all that good. And it really does, I think, allow for people with disabilities, for aging in place, and probably also for some of these second units that we would like to have for affordable housing. That I think that works much better on a single level. So, great work. I think this is the direction that I think we should be going in.
Thank you, Dr. Bundy. Niccolo, you thought about this, I know.
No, I concur with what we just said, especially also for the smaller lots. I think that you are right on. I think the fire, it's really is going to help. And I agree. I mean, I think this is a very modest, but, an improvement which probably is going to help as far as variances because, it has been constant. So well done so far.
Jennifer?
I don't have any comments. I think you guys have done a good job, and I think it's a good direction. I'm supportive.
Yeah, so, on that 4,500 square foot lot, that allows them an extra 360 square feet, which is not a significant amount, but it does a 1,400 square foot house, I defy a couple with a child to live in very comfortably. It's done all the time, but it's not that comfortable. So 1,800 bumps it to just a little more. You get a bedroom out of it. That's a hotel room. 360 square feet is a small hotel room. And that's what you get out of it. Or something else, but a king-size suite is 450 square feet. So 360 square feet doesn't even give you a bath. That's the bedroom. So, but that's a helpful amount for this. So I think, you know, it allows people just to say, we can breathe a little bit on these smaller lots and not have to apply for a variance, but still go through all of the other requirements that the town requires. So I think that my question would be then, how does this then rotate next? Where do you go with this next?
Well, the next step would be to prepare a formal zoning ordinance amendment, which, you know, basically, we're seeing sort of outlines of that as Doug has written in his staff report. But we would come back, that's a formal noticing procedure as well, similar to what we've done. But ultimately, that's a commission recommendation to the council in order to change the ordinance. Anything else I'm gonna, no, I think that's, it would just be formatted in a way, we would do the typical red line of the existing ordinance, so you could see where things have changed and reformatting and put it in sort of the format that you typically have seen with respect to zoning ordinance amendments.
So I will only ask, because it needs to be asked, is what is the downside here? What is the unretractable, implication of this going forward that we would regret, or you might look at as regretful?
Yeah, you know, it's a good question. It's a fair question. I think one of the reasons why we picked this one after looking at it and dealing with lot coverage was that we didn't see many negatives to actually moving forward with it. There were many positives. I mean, what you could ultimately end up with, I think, you may get, I think, from my perspective, would be you go through this process and then we get, you know, the first month somebody coming in for a variance for lot coverage and you're like, wait, what? You know, and we have to go through that struggle. But I think the point would be to try to nip those applications or those expectations from applicants at the counter before they sort of move forward with that and say, hey, no, we've set a new policy. We've just went through this process. This is the new standard. You got to work within those bounds. We don't see a really a need to, you know, we don't want to. The variance route is sort of going to be a struggle for you, whereas now it's sort of the precedent has been set and it's sort of everyone's. You know, we see that time and again. You know, I don't know, Doug. Doug's done a lot of thinking about this. I mean, we've. Again, it doesn't change house size. You're talking about coverage. I think, I guess when we had the first meeting, the discussion of is there a negative sort of to the fact that you get less impervious surfaces to a certain extent because you're expanding horizontally rather than up. And we decided, you know, that's another issue to tackle, and maybe we tackle that with sort of a different code adoption process where we think about greening our cities, our townscape, so to speak, and sort of incorporate that into a host of other measures but we didn't feel we wanted to deal with that in terms of lot coverage. That was the one that really we know that, what was the term that other cities have I think one of the architects at the last meeting talked about it. Maybe it was Michael. Well, I forget what the codes, other cities have adopted certain codes that are.
Just specific to, they'll have lot coverage in addition to impervious surface calculations?
Yeah, like, the whole impervious surface. Yeah, there's a code related to impervious surface calculations.
Yeah.
But you know, like I said, it's I don't know if there's any real data on that necessarily. It's because a deck, again, it allows water to go, it's not like you're into the dirt, so it's something to think about. But again, we didn't see a lot of downside to doing this. And that was one of the reasons why we thought it was sort of a relatively straightforward amendment that was relatively simple to process, and a few small changes could have actually a pretty big impact on options available to homeowners, and less variances, and more flexibility for, and less barriers to small additions that we've seen people want to do.
Okay, well, that's great. So I think that you have from this commission a sort of stamp of approval on this, and to move it into the next.
Not quite. We'll wait till the next
I know,
public hearing.
right.
Can I just ask one other question?
I hear you, Peter.
About the
Yeah.
2%. How did you guys come up with the 2% limit for the unenclosed structures?
I think that part of the 2% was, as Adam mentioned earlier, kind of looking at examples of projects that have gone over by just a bit, and looking at what elements may have put them over that limit.
Okay.
Like over on Birch, as we saw with previous cases, there's a whole block where almost every single house has a a shade over the back of the house. And so it's looking at situations
I
like
just
that.
wonder if 2% is the right number, if it should be more than that, if it's, I don't know.
Yeah.
To Phyllis's point, I struggle to limit someone putting an arbor or a trellis up and calling that, significant massing in most cases.
But, yeah, but I think that's, yeah, okay. That's something we could look at. I think there's also plenty of, most examples, I think, people aren't maxed out on their lot coverage today.
Okay.
So that if they want to put something up there, you're not getting into that zone.
Okay.
And that's even under the 30% or 35% lot
Got it.
coverage. So
Okay.
if you,
Okay.
but I hear you.
It's not a problem. that
No,
we're
I think
trying
the
to
one
address.
case we did see was Birch. It did kick it over to 43%, so in that, where you have,
Okay.
I don't know.
It's 2% or 3% or 4%. Okay. got it.
And
Yeah.
and in a case where someone might have 35% and they're looking at doing some changes, they might have 7% then to.
Yeah.
They're working within
Okay.
that.
Got it.
But the other option, and we're, obviously, this was why this was in here as a discussion point, is we could specifically exempt, for example,
Unenclosed.
trellis structures. Unenclosed gets difficult, like what
Okay.
is it, because you almost start to talk about permeability of a roof structure.
Okay.
But you could say trellises. I think everybody kind of knows what a trellis is, sort of, and an arbor. And you could just say those features, those two features, and I don't know if there's any others, are not counted. If that was sort of bothering us from that perspective, and but sort of then you're sort of picking out, I don't know, just.
Phyllis?
One of the things I've seen a lot of lately, it seems to be the new style, is, I'm not quite sure of the name, sail canvases,
Yeah.
rather than an awning, all these very
Right.
nicely shaped. They're very interesting. And, they're separate little sections. It's not like an awning that rolls out, which kind of not very attractive. Do you consider this covered or uncovered? Because it's not solidly covered.
Yeah.
Design gets interesting. Let's go.
Part of it is, it's a good question, and I don't think there's the perfect answer to it, but the first question is it a structure? And does it have a permanent place on the ground? This is where something like a picnic table that you can pick up and move
Yes.
around, or some shade structures that you can pick up and move around, might not be seen as a structure, may not require a building permit, and then wouldn't be in the purview of this. So the first question is whether it's a structure, and then it's hard, and that's where we come sort of case by case.
And we have
So
certain
it's
things.
subjective in some cases.
Yeah, and certain things try to get at it where we count certain things like patios, covered patios, unenclosed on 3 sides, not counting the wall that's attached to the house.
Sunrooms, for example.
Yeah, so you can say if it's, so it's hard to get the perfect definition that's gonna cover everything. At some point, you have to use you know, the intent of the rules and look at what is actually
Sure.
this new shade thing that's being proposed and say, make a determination and a judgment on that. And that's where staff policy comes into play, where we make sure that we are applying certain things consistently. And those can also frankly be challenged by anybody if we have a formal like a staff policy. But, yeah, we try to use common sense at the end of the day on stuff like that. And as long as we can consistently apply it to people equally. I mean,
Another quick question. How long is this whole procedure going to go? Not tonight, but I mean, the whole.
well, I'll say, yeah, so just to finish up on your question about the process, I mean, we could even, given where we are now, I think one consideration was bringing this back as a zoning ordinance amendment at the next meeting, which then you would see, you could make your recommendation, and then at the next council meeting, they'd have to have the first reading, and then a second reading, and then it actually gets enacted 30 days after that. So, you know, it's
8 weeks.
2.5, yeah, 8
to
weeks
10.
to 2.5 months or so.
Right.
That would be the fastest, and, you know, that would be the process. We don't think this has any CEQA implications from doing this, so.
Okay. All right, I think we've beat this horse.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that's what just in terms of that, if we would be happy to, I think, be able to bring this back on May 9th and for your recommendation to the council.
Great. Okay. We'll close this item then.
Great.
We'll close this discussion about the lot coverage study session, and we'll move on to reports from the commissioners. And Jennifer, you attended the last the council meeting.
I did. So, the exciting business item was the first one, which was the Tamridge's update, which I'm sure you've all seen now. There have been numerous articles in the Marin IJ, but basically the project manager, Phil Roy, said they were 60 days out from completion, which would be in June. They basically deconstructed the entire, all 6 buildings down to the studs and rebuilt it. He feels very confident that there are no more water intrusion issues. They did extensive air quality testing throughout the project during this process to make sure that there was no mold. And they'll do it again at completion. Every window and door was removed, which included 1,200 windows total, in case anyone's interested in that number. They corrected the flashing and water issues. So that was the big thing. Let's see, what else? They talked about reforming the pension program for the shared fire services. The Corte Madera Marsh Restoration Project, I think, was also interesting. Discussed allowing community access and building a bridge over this breach in the easement to allow access on the northern side of the marsh. It sounded like they were considering that, and more to come. There's going to be this meeting regarding the vulnerability of sea level rise, which I think there's a big announcement on next door that's happening, I think, this week.
Tonight.
Oh, okay, so we're not there, but that's happening,
There's another one.
which I thought sounded interesting. If anyone's interested, I have the website you can go to. They did a financial review. It looked like the general fund was in a good position. We have approximately $5 million that's unallocated. And then the final order of business was this consideration of going, or not the final order, but the last one that I made it to was the consideration of the going to 100% renewable energy for all Corte Madera facilities. They called it Deep Green. We currently spend about $160,000 in utilities through Marin Clean Energy. We can up that percentage to be 100% from our current 50% renewable, and it costs an additional $12,000 per year. It was passed unanimously, and that's all I've got.
So a question for you, on the marsh restoration, what is the plan of action? They have some ideas that they're going to massage, or what are they going to do with that?
Do you know, Adam, do you have like more clarity on that than I might?
No, I think you
in
described
listening
it.
to it,
Yeah.
it just sounded like they were gonna revisit it and look at the feasibility, I think, of this pedestrian bridge. I think they were trying to address some of the public sentiment that people were upset that they were no longer gonna be able to access it.
Right. Go around the edges of it, yeah. So I think that's right. I mean, I think Todd gave a report just saying essentially that Todd was going to push to have the Golden Gate Bridge Transit District take a serious look at this idea of having a bridge over the breach, where we're going to breach to allow for the bay water to come in and create this habitat, but allow a bridge to sort of cross over that to continue this sort of route around the perimeter of the levees, rather than sort of what was previously talked about, which was going out to the edge of the levee and having to turn back because there's no way to get across to
Yeah,
where.
they didn't spend a lot of time on
No,
it.
yeah, I think there's work to do on it, but I think it was more like that's the direction Todd wanted to go with Golden Gate Bridge, at least in discussions with them.
And the opposers of that did not appear then to have traction on that?
I don't think it was a
It
it wasn't a discussion item.
It was like a
report.
very brief sort of update about, we've
So
heard
There will be
you.
opportunity, though, I'm sure,
Yeah.
at some point for that.
We'll hear that. Thank you very much, Jennifer.
No problem.
Adam, what do you have to say?
Jennifer covered some of that, but the sea level rise vulnerability assessment is also going to be April 29th at Novato City Hall from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. So if anyone wants to go to that one, there's also, tonight was at Mill Valley, but might have to go to Novato. I guess that's Saturday. Is that Saturday? It might be a Saturday, 29th. Wanted to mention, I will be not here at the next meeting for the Planning Commission, May 9th. I will be out at the American Planning Association Conference, which is actually in New York this year, so I will be.
Your old neighborhood.
Yeah, yep, taking a look back there, see what's going on. We will have a full schedule for May 23rd. It's looking like tentatively, this is yet to be played out, but potentially Corte Madera Ann would come back, and Marin Montessori. I know they're looking to have their application heard at that date as well, so we'll have to wait and see. May 9th as well, we're looking at a pretty full slate. If we bring lot coverage back, we're also looking at a house on Crescent, potentially a design review application and conditional use permit application for the Budget Inn, which is in the queue, and they've had their story polls
Are
up.
those flags? Yeah, that's what I noticed.
Story
Like, are they
pole.
adding? Are those story poles? And are they? I didn't know if they were just trying to advertise,
Yeah.
like draw
Everybody
attention,
thought so.
or if they were. Are
Those
they
are-
adding a second story? Is that what they're
Those
looking
are
to do?
First
indicating sort of the new roof lines and the full, I mean, the
Okay.
proposals.
But they must be. They're proposing to add a second story of units.
No.
No.
Rehab the existing structures taller.
Just make it that much taller without
Making it a
getting more
little
units.
prettier.
And that, yeah, nicer. I mean, right now they're
Needed.
boxes, so they're actually trying to create a design there. Anyways, but that is a potential, and I think,
I want to know if Phyllis thinks that in its current state, it's an excellent design or
Of what?
the Budget Inn.
Uh,
If it's an example of historic
Anything
good
they do is
excellence.
design.
gonna be great.
There's an example of There's several
We already
examples
approved
of
it.
things that we wish had never happened.
Was there another?
I like to
Was
see
there
us
another-
have a history and have things that are older, but just because it's old doesn't make it worthwhile saving as is.
No, that's,
Was there another item for tonight, potentially? So anyways, that still to play out a little bit. We are also, the council, at the council, we're putting on the agenda at the least. The appeal for 159 Prince Royal will be at May 2nd. We'll see how that plays out, whether it actually will be heard or not. And then what else do we have? We have a draft plan Bay Area 2040 is out for public comment and review. That is at www.2040.planbayarea.org. Just to report that the comment letter that Mayor First, or at the time was Vice Mayor First, sent on behalf of the town did result in some lower projections for employment growth and household growth in 2040. But again, those projections, this round of the Plan Bay Area update is not tied to any RENA assessment or numbers, so it's a little, I think the IGA actually had a pretty good overview of it, if you read the article on Monday. And finally, just a heads up, we are folding in a code enforcement into getting a contract or consultant on board soon to help us with code enforcement. So that's a very exciting development. But
Code
it's gonna,
enforcement.
yeah, it's going to take a little bit of time, but that's something that we. Her name is Pam. She will be starting tomorrow, in fact. So, but looking forward to actually having that resource at staff's disposal to sort of
In the office or in the field?
both.
Oh, really? Oh.
Yeah, mostly. I mean, yeah, the majority of the work is. It's not different from proactive. It's just dealing with the actual complaints and the issues that we get coming in. It's not going to be a proactive code enforcement. That's not the intent of it. It's really just dealing with the caseloads that we already have and keeping track of them and following them through to get better results. And also I think hopefully to act as a deterrent for people in the future who are the bad actors, that they know that there's some repercussions.
They have a sign down there that says, "We are watching you." So, that's great news. Phyllis?
Yeah, you had skipped the part for commissioners. Yesterday, my neighbor brought to me the folder that Jennifer should have received before last Tuesday's meeting.
Oh,
Yes, apparently,
yeah,
my
I didn't
neighbors.
get it, but that's
Yeah, my
okay.
neighbors were away and they had a pet sitter who collected their mail, so the person just grabbed mail and they came back, so so I just want to ask, would you please, I don't know if it comes out of the planning office or the council's office, would you let them know, I'm supposed to get the next one and make sure they have a copy of our list of who's.
I've gotten it the other times when I was supposed
Yeah,
to
it's
go.
Next
only
one is Bob, I
recently. Bob
they're
Bundy
next.
and I, they were,
Phyllis
Getting
is
confused.
next, and then Bob.
yeah. So would you bring them the list and remind them so it goes to the right person? And I apologize that I wasn't able to get it to you. I didn't know I had it per se.
That's
Okay.
okay.
Very good. Okay, so noted. Does anyone have any adjustments to the minutes for the April 7th meeting?
No. I'll move the minutes.
Second.
Voice vote? Or,
April 7th or April 11th?
Yeah, we have two sets, I think,
Oh.
I
actually.
only got one set in my notebook.
Oh,
here.
you know what? There wasn't a dividers, I think is what happened. Oh, no? You
No,
know what?
No,
I only see April
Oh,
11th.
Oh,
no.
yes.
The only ones we have to approve is April 11th.
Well, it's supposed to also be the March 28th, because we didn't, I remember at the last meeting, we ended before we got to the minutes.
I don't
So
have
they're
them.
attached at the end of the, Doug says, the lot coverage.
If you didn't get a chance to review them, then we'll
Well-
include it at the next meeting.
Well, no, I read them as part of the staff report on lot coverage, but I just assumed they were there to give us the information we'd had last time. So you're saying we didn't vote on them last
No,
time?
we didn't. We ran out the door.
Well, it was 11:15. How about, I'll be willing to amend my motion to cover the minutes of March 28th and of April the 11th.
Is there a second for that?
Second
I wasn't there, so I can't.
Okay.
Oh, we have to vote on them separately because we have
Two commissioners.
two commissioners who weren't here on the 11th, so why don't we do the 28th first?
Okay, then.
Are they in here?
So you redo your motion
I
to-
will, yes, I will forget all the other motions I made. The motion is to approve the draft minutes of the March 28th regular
Alright.
Planning Commission meeting.
Got it.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I will make a motion to approve the draft minutes of the Planning Commission meeting of April 11th.
You second, Bob?
Second.
Okay. 3 votes.
All in favor?
Aye.
And two
Abstentions.
abstentions, Commissioner Friedman and Caldera.
Okay.
Yes.
So with that said, let's adjourn.
Excellent.
Thank you, guys.
Okay.